Hello, Simone. I am so excited to be talking to you today. We're going to have some stats here that I think are going to shock you and our listeners because they shocked me. And I'll just jump into, I think, one of the most surprising to me. So the average American, when they click through to a newspaper, is on that link for 1.5 minutes. Actually, a little less than that, so I'm inflating the numbers a bit, okay? If you look at the New York Times, the New York Times gets around 385.7 million clicks per month. That comes down to around 9,642K hours on the New York Times, okay? Now, consider that they have 1,700 journalists working there, and there are 2 of us. That means that the content we produce is consumed by 7 times as much time as the content produced by an average New York Times journalist. That means that the entire New York Times is only 121x more watched than our podcast just on YouTube.
Right.
And we are not a big channel.
Would you like to know more?
So there's just no way that this can be financially justified going forward. I mean, how can advertisers continue? Well, now the New York Times is a subscriber based. So maybe this is more the Substack thing. Is New York Times invented the Substack model before the Substack? Well, I mean, I guess they went back to the original magazine. So the original, before they were newspapers, they were magazines. And magazines were the original Substack. They were specialized information that people paid for because it was useful to them in their careers and in their social lives. And then things sort of went on to newspapers and they went mass. And now we've gone back to niche with Substack. And I think the New York Times is becoming that too. So somehow the New York Times is able to pay for it. I think a lot of its legacy reputation. But for these other publications, like general newspapers,
go over all sorts of other publications, go over their actual, like how much they're consumed, and then compare that with popular YouTube channels.
Okay.
And unpopular YouTube channels. So just in case you're wondering the math here, typically an individual who has a Substack subscriber is making like 500% more. Well, I think more than that, maybe like 1,000% more from that viewer than they would be if that viewer was on YouTube or something like that. I mean, just consider you're watching this episode and you are paying me to watch this episode maybe a fraction of a cent. But if you were on Substack and you were paying like, I don't know, $5 a month to me or something like that, you'd be paying significantly more. I'd also point out here how much of the ad spend within traditional media is sentiment driven by the advertisers. As evidence of this, we see how many advertisers were able to pull off of X/Twitter the moment it was bought by Elon. If they were advertising with the goal of reaching a consumer, this would not have been something they would have done. It would have been like, obviously he didn't change the math of advertising on X. All it changed was the sentiment of the advertising class. So in a big way, traditional media is something that is just being subsidized by the, I guess what I'd call it, the Karens who run marketing departments. The core thesis that I'm going to be getting across here is when you look to legacy media and you are thinking about the impact it has on our culture, you shouldn't think about it as a thing that is separate from the other online influencers of our day. Mm-hmm. You should just think of it as a specific category. What's the word I'm looking for here? Crowdsourced like community. So I'll word it this way, right? People can be like, well, the New York Times is quite different from something like a YouTube personality because, you know, the New York Times has thousands of reporters, right? And YouTube
but it has a sizable staff, yes.
It has 1,700.
Okay, almost 2,000, but that's not thousands. That's hundreds.
Okay, anyway, point being, the New York Times is a sizable staff. Therefore, you know, in YouTubers, they're just like you and me. But that's also not true. If you look at large YouTubers, like, God, I've absolutely loved watching the Illuma Hottie fall.
When something as horrible as this happens, people always come out and admit fault and tell the horrifying truth of their continued negligence and malpractice, right? Yeah, you're right, that never happens. What am I thinking? Instead, they usually do their best to hide everything and blame anyone but themselves, and wouldn't you know it, that's exactly what happened here too.
That has been very, very fun. But, she was just the talking head, but she had like 5 writers. She wrote almost nothing herself, from my understanding, or nothing herself.
Yeah.
And this is true for a lot of the big YouTubers you watch. Game Theory, for example, for ages, Matt Pat hasn't been doing anything other than presenting.
They treat it like a professional business, as they should. Yeah, most, well, okay, not most, but many of the YouTube channels that I regularly watch, and that's because they are constantly churning out content, are absolutely teams, and I respect that, and that's good, and they work well.
The point I'm making here is they are teams, and traditional media is a team. Okay.
Yeah. Yes.
And sometimes the teams are bigger, sometimes the teams are smaller. And then people will be like, well, yeah, but people trust traditional media more. And I'm like, that's also just factually untrue at this point. One, you can look at the statistics and see it's not true. These days, it's only 32% of Americans have, quote unquote, a fair amount of trust in the media. And in the 1970s, this was 70%. These days, the amount of Americans who have a fair amount of trust in the media is lower than the amount who totally distrust it. But then too, I was talking with Simone about this, and she was saying, it's really interesting that traditional media used to frame itself as like at least attempting to be centrist.
Mm-hmm.
And it has completely abandoned that pretext. And you were going over, where NPR they at least had on the Republican to give his defense.
Well, specifically, there's a podcast associated with NPR called The Indicator from Planet Money. That's part of their Planet Money economics podcast series, which I love listening to. The Indicator recently ran 2 episodes, one on Kamala Harris's economic policy, one on Trump's economic policy. Per journalistic tradition, they tried, I think, to play both sides in that or present both sides, and that they interviewed Trump-friendly economic organizations when talking about Trump policy, and interviewed Kamala Harris-friendly policy organizations when talking about Kamala's. It's just that the way that they framed them was very different. They included a very awkward pause when interviewing one of the Trump stands, essentially, and really made the Kamala stands look very intelligent. So there's still a lot of skew, but they're sort of performatively trying to do this.
Yeah. So, and then I pointed out to you when you were trying to make this claim, I was like, yeah, but consider the big, personality driven non-mainstream media like Joe Rogan or something. Like,
right.
Yeah, Joe Rogan is known as having a conservative bias, but it's not like a mainstream conservative bias. It's like, a slightly anti-Trump, pro-Kennedy, like it was his own thing. It wasn't the party platform.
Well, that's what's really interesting, is it definitely feels as though most of the legacy traditional media platforms have become operatives, unpaid operatives of either the Democrat or Republican Party. What I hear on Fox News definitely feels like the official Republican Party press wing. And I feel the same about many liberal.
Where we know of collusion that happened recently around this.
With the debate and ABC, is that correct?
Oh, no. Well, okay, so there was the case of the debate, and ABC, who was doing the debate, has been found. They provided Kamala the questions first and were colluding to give her specific pre-coached questions.
According to an anonymous sworn affidavit from someone on that news team, yes.
Okay, but
allegedly at this point.
I think we saw the debate. I mean, I think
that what is proven is that the person who signs the payroll checks of the people, the journalists who led the debate, is an open and active Kamala Harris supporter. So there is that.
Okay, so but I'm not talking about that. We were actually talking with the guy who wrote the abortion section for Project 2025, which doesn't say what Kamala's team said. It says it's not for a national abortion monitoring. It's just saying that states have to report the number of abortions that happen within the states. And this is a perfectly reasonable thing to do, given that like even Tim Walz's state reports the number of miscarriages. Like, why wouldn't you report the number of abortions? Like, why do you hide babies that are terminated accidentally naturally, but not babies that are terminated intentionally, just for statistics reasons. And the only reason you would do that is politically speaking. But anyway, and they've tried to twist this into all sorts of crazy conspiracy theories. But anyway, he pointed out that he gave a press announcement when Project 25 came out, and he said only one journalist came to it. And this
right,
was
they host. Well, I can't remember how many.
It was a
people
year
showed up,
before Trump ran.
Yes,
But
this was months in advance. They hosted a luncheon. To launch the event, to have also active Q&A. They invited every major publication. They were very, very open and transparent about this, and they wanted people to talk about it and cover it. There was no secrecy around this.
But then what ended up happening is, before any of the modern stories that were like exaggerating it went live, he started to all of a sudden, from multiple news outlets simultaneously, get inbound inreach about it.
Yeah, basically they launched to crickets. Nobody responded, nobody engaged, and no one covered them. And then 1 week, out of nowhere, he started receiving a ton of inbound requests from pretty much every major news publication. And it was clear that at that point, probably the Democratic Party decided that, okay, now in terms of our communication policy, we are going to do everything we can to connect candidate Donald Trump to Heritage Foundation's Project 2025, even though there's no affiliation and Donald Trump hasn't talked about it, endorsed it, or even said he's read it. And that is going to be an effective tactic. We need to make sure that every operative we have brings it up at every opportunity, etc. And then suddenly he hears about it from everyone. And
but I note here that when we're talking about the new non-legacy media not being a voice of the party, I mean this on the left as well. It's not just on the right where this is true. Yes, there is more coordination among left-wing influencers.
Mhm.
However, you're talking about like how the Young Turk guy, whatever his name is,
Urger,
whatever,
CENK.
He comes off as very like libertarianish in his beliefs.
Yeah. Like he's definitely he's in favor of capitalism and against corporatism. So he's not a Marxist like most Democrats in terms of like Democrat operatives these days. He definitely comes across as very libertarian. When I heard him on an interview with Lex Friedman recently, I was like, wow, yeah, I largely agree with a lot of the things you're saying, which I didn't expect because I'm so used to most progressive media operatives being super Marxist or communist, and so it's weird. But so I hear you, and I really like the fact that we'll say new media figures, podcasters, YouTubers, bloggers, Substackers, whatever we want to call them, do have much more independent thought and don't follow these party lines. What they don't have is some of the original trappings of journalism, legacy journalism, that I did really like, were things like protecting sources. People have been jailed, journalists have been jailed for refusing to say who their sources were, for there being very clear rules of what's on the record or off the record, for having a strong policy about publishing corrections when they're wrong. Bloggers don't typically do things like that. We certainly don't go back and publish a retraction if we realized we were wrong about something.
Yeah, well, and I'd also note, because YouTube doesn't let us. The way that the YouTube upload system works is horrible, and they need to change it. They should allow you to post like edits to your videos. They don't really. You can cut little bits out, but you can't add anything or correct anything, which would be a very important feature to have.
Yeah, as we start replacing journalists, or continue to actually. But what's interesting though is that many content creators don't even like being associated with journalists. One, I was just listening to a podcast this morning where the podcaster said it at some dinner. Someone was saying, well, as you're a journalist, I want to be clear, this is strictly off the record. And they took great umbrage upon being called a journalist and having someone tell them that they were off the record, not because he necessarily wanted to say what he was saying or quote him, but it's interesting that they didn't want to be
like, I didn't sign up for this set of rules. I didn't take the Hippocratic Oath. You can't tell me. I'm a street knifer. I'm not a surgeon, okay? I stab people in the street, sir. That is my profession. That is my life. But this is something that like I had begun to intuit, not from looking at the statistics, but from you, because we get covered in mainstream media all the time these days, whether it's the Guardian or the Telegraph. We have a piece coming out on us in the Wall Street Journal, the Philadelphia Inquirer just a couple months ago. So just all the time we're in media, and we've been able to gauge based on media how much media ends up converting to actual like online stuff. So I can say, how many new Twitter followers am I going to get from going on an episode of Side Scrollers versus how many new Twitter followers am I going to get from like a front page Wall Street Journal?
Yeah, or how many letters or emails or whatever will we receive?
Yeah, and generally my read is that a mainstream newspaper putting you on their front page is probably the same as being in a YouTube video with maybe 60K watches, which is just not a lot. And this is for us. And I would note here that it changes. If you have no virality, but you're on the front page, because it's happened for the third top paper in Canada for us, right? That was equivalent to a YouTube video with maybe 8K to 15K views.
Other exception is if something goes viral online, then
that changes
everything.
And this is what I would note. So the traditional media does not really have the capability to sway the mainstream discussion in the way it did historically, because the true power it holds is on its stories that go viral. And it doesn't have absolute control over what stories go viral. And that's where you and I have been incredibly good at manipulating mainstream media. And people can watch our media baiting story for specifically how these strategies work. We have a podcast on this topic. But the point being is that we often attempt to bait media into creating a story that the progressive media will guffaw at and think is insane and can go viral in progressive circles, but your average American is going to agree with, because that's the easiest way to, and I would note that the mainstream media pieces do go viral more easily than any other type of media, because they are seen as having an air of credentials to them in terms of their virality, especially when people are like, can you believe? Can you believe? But what's interesting is they're actually better at going viral around conservative causes than around progressive causes, because they're not as likely that, like, when the media loves the thing, it's very unlikely to go viral. Things only go viral when the media hates a thing. And so the question is that virality good for progressive causes or bad for progressive causes? The core question is, were they smart enough to write about the thing they were mad about in a way that your average conservative and centrist would also be mad? Or are they writing about that thing in a way where your average conservative and centrist would be like, wow, you sound like a crazy person? And was somebody able to bait them into that? That's really where that is. Did you want to note anything here before I go further with stats?
No, onward, my husband.
Oh my goodness. Okay, here we are. So the New York Times, just for some more stats on the New York Times. Now, I did the numbers for the 1,700 full-time journalists employed by the New York Times, but the New York Times actually has 5,900 full-time employees.
Right.
That means that we reach a mainstream audience as much, doing this part-time, so I'm pretending we're doing this full-time, and I'm dividing it by 2 because I'm saying there's 2 of us on the team.
All right, you're being extremely generous there, because I just show up to talk with you sometimes.
You reach people 25 times more than the average New York Times employee.
Brutal.
7 times more. And keep in mind, we're still growing, right? Like, and we're growing pretty quickly. Like, we've doubled our watch time probably in the last 3.5 months or so. So, and in fact, to beat an NY Times journalist, you only need to get 469 watch hours a month.
Can that be right?
Yeah, we're going to go into how it's right in a second, but yeah, it does work out. So next, it has to do with subscribers being so much more valuable, and many of the New York Times subscribers not actually reading the New York Times.
So they buy their New York Times, just kind of like how you used to buy a New Yorker subscription to look sophisticated, and they would very conspicuously leave it on your desk or something as someone walked in, so they would see that, of course, you read the New Yorker, but you would never actually read it.
Yeah. Okay, so let's keep going here. For Fox News, they get 336.7 million visitors to their news site a month. and that translates to around 8,417,000 K watch hours. Keep in mind, for the New York Times, it was 9,642 K watch hours. To give you an idea of just how few people actually read the New York Times, remember that perinatalist book that we mentioned that was being pushed by the New York Times? Specifically, the author of the book did opinion pieces in the New York Times. They were written about in the New York Times. And the book was called What Are Children For? On Ambivalence and Choice. Well, if you go to Amazon right now, this book has only 6 reviews. I remember thinking when we wrote our perinatalist book, The Pragmatist Guide to Crafting Religion, we were like, oh my gosh, if only something like the New York Times would shill our book. If only we could get any mainstream media to care about what we're doing. And I guess now we see that it wouldn't have really mattered. If you go to, down, like now I'm going to go through the ones that are more like mainstream progressive-y stuff. So Daily Costs is only around 1,009 K watch hours per month. If you go to the Huffington Post, and so if people don't know, the Huffington Post, like a lot of people thought of it as real journalism, but it never really was. It was more like a distributed blogging platform. Like we've written for the Huffington Post. The Huffington Post just basically goes to individual bloggers and is like, hey, are you willing to write something random for us for basically free? And maybe we'll pay you. And you're like, yeah, okay.
Did we ever we never got paid for anything that we put there.
They might have paid us some token amount.
I don't think so.
But yeah, so, and people are like, oh, look, the Huffington Post is contradicting itself. And I'm like, that's like saying 2 people on Facebook are contradicting themselves. But the Huffington Post only has about 565 K watch hours per month, or sort of view hours per month, which translates to 22.6 million views. And then if you go down to Kotaku, Kotaku had like a whole subreddit deemed to fighting it and everything like that, right? At 247,000 watch hours per month, so just not very big at all, and significantly smaller than something like Side Scrollers, which is at 350,000 watch hours per month, as we had mentioned earlier. Now, down at the bottom here, we have the 9.5 million visitors to Salon, which is 237,000 per month. So Salon is like a magazine that you've heard of, right, Simone? Like, you know Salon. So Salon is only 3 times bigger than our channel in terms of how much time people spend on it.
Okay. Oh, wow.
And so now let's contrast these numbers with some like big online YouTube YouTubers.
Well, and I do want to say the Salon numbers are sobering, but I don't really consider the Fox numbers of interest because most people are watching this on legacy TV in their old folks' homes and hospitals and whatnot.
Yeah, so you can go to individuals like, so for our channel, just because it's hard for me to get the actual watch time of other channels, I can look at our channel and know that we're at 452,000 views per month. And then I can use that to try to calculate out how long people are probably watching these other sources.
Yeah.
I didn't do that for Asmongold, but he's at 34,000 per month. 34,404,000 per month. Now, for Side Scrollers, it's 1.715 million per month, which if they are getting around the same view time as us is at 302. Note, I actually reached out to Stuttering Craig to get his actual numbers, and he is significantly above what I expected. 360,000 watch hours per every 28 days. And all the stats here were calculated with the assumption that it was around 300 for every 28 days. I guess people just watch the Side Scrollers much longer per click than they watch our channel. But I guess that makes sense because he does some streams that are like 3 or 4 hours long. 0.5 thousand watch hours per month, which means the New York Times is only 30 times larger in terms of cultural impact when contrasted with Side Scrollers. In terms of like the number of people watching it. Side Scrollers with Craig that we were on, Simone, together.
Yeah. No, Side Scrollers, they're great.
Clownfish TV, by the way, 4.8 million watchers per month. So
and this is another married couple that often talks about Disney and also pop culture and media in general.
And then you can get to something like Joe Rogan, which is 42 million viewers per month. Now, he was a bit harder to suss out, but I'm sort of judging that he's probably around 7,405,000 watch time hours. Let's put it this way, 7,405K watch time. And so that would make him, almost as big as the entire New York Times.
Well, let's look at the Nielsen ratings. I just sent you on WhatsApp the traditional top 10 page for Nielsen's data center. They do basically TV watching, and they even do streaming stats now in the US, Indy. And I'm looking at their traditional TV top 10. I'm looking at Prime Broadcast Network TV, and it's giving me a better understanding of more like, what people are watching. There were 18.5 million viewers of the Summer Olympics. Andy.
She's goobering. Keep her away from the camera. I mean,
even the mic. I'm trying. So I feel like that's more impressive. On YouTube,
Not
people are really.
To give you an idea of how not really that's impressive, that means that the number of people who watched the Olympics was only 40x more than the number of people who watched our little bitty podcast in the last month. That's insane. This is a teeny nothing of a YouTube channel. But what I'm looking at is online written publications.
Okay.
And I think one of the big problems that the right has is they go around to these small websites like, Mary Sue or like, the Kotaku. And they think because these websites are quote unquote real journalists, that they are in a fight with somebody who anyone is listening to other than the people who are listening to them because of the fight itself. And I think this solves some of the questions we were asking. Where is the woke consumer base? When we were asking this question, like, where are the people who were supposed to buy Concord? They might just be astronomically smaller than anyone is anticipating.
Yeah. Well, and that should have big implications for the 2024 presidential election, but we'll see. I feel like that's going to be a better gauge for this than many other measures because
I think it shows that we need to focus, if you want to keep media free, on the medium platforms like YouTube and influencing organizations like Google. Like I almost had a job at YouTube, by the way. That was one of the departments that was thinking about hiring me at Google. And so anyone I think that's how you make a difference at these organizations is get jobs at them and advocate on the inside within the organization. Because I think that they are the last source of freedom that we're going to have access to. And it's interesting as well how I think this new format of media works with conservative American institutions and ideas. You mentioned this about early America, where you would go and you would see like a group of churches in a town, and you were like, it was the early social media influencers. They were all right next to each other, and they were all like various Protestant churches, and you would go to the one who had the best influencer, the one who you liked to listen to the most, or you had the best takes.
Right.
And that's sort of where we are right now. Is individuals are choosing who they want to listen to. And I think one of the heartening things is that the independent people went super partisan later than the institutions. They have been more resistant to partisanism than the institutions. Where, I take somebody like Destiny, who's like a big, leftist. He'll still like debate righties, right? Like, you're not going to see that really within the mainstream news organizations anymore. And I think that that's really fascinating as well. And it also shows the way that people relate to their sources of information is changing. And that I believe that there is an expectation of some form of, now, when I say people, I think, often frame parasocial relationships incorrectly. They frame it as being like a friendship or something like that, when instead I think a better way to think about it is we are characters within your mind's high school, and they hate us or think certain things about us, but we are part of the brain space that you have used to build your high school. High school never ends. And, we might be in one group of kids, and then like ContraPoints might be in another group of kids, and you modify what you're hearing from each of us within those individual biases. And it does feel that way. Like the online space feels very much like I gotta play here. High school never ends. But it feels a bit like you're playing out these roles of the characters within a high school. And that's what the parasocial relationship means. And where it becomes dangerous is only the, delusional individual who thinks that he's dating the cheerleader when the cheerleader doesn't know who he is. People act as if that's a unique thing to parasocial relationships. And it's like, no, it's not. That's a normal thing of our minds, high school. Just that sometimes that's in a high school and sometimes that's a group of YouTubers.
That makes a lot of sense. Yeah, that's a better way of putting it. And you can be just as liable to have a one-way or unhealthy relationship in high school as you would in the digital realm. So totally get it. Yes.
Yeah. Well, hold on. I'm going to see. Do I have any other stats here? Because I had some other fun stats. Oh, yeah, here are some fun ones. As of 2022, only about 12% of U.S. adults use newspapers as daily sources of news. In 2020, a survey found that 16% of Americans got their news from physical newspapers, among other sources. I do not believe either of those stats at all. I think those are like an American thinking like, have I seen a newspaper recently? Yes.
Well, I think you're forgetting how many much older people there are in the
they're
world.
They're not going to the news. I mean, maybe they're picking up physical newspapers.
Yes.
The Wall Street Journal had the highest circulation of all U.S. newspapers in 2020.
Okay.
That's going to be covering us soon with like a documentary, so that'll be fun. Only 3% of U.S. adults cite print newspapers as their primary information source. Like, of course, who trusts newspapers anymore? Like, they're so dishonest. And this is the thing. You want to get how dishonest newspapers are? If you've always been like, well, people say if you know anything about a news source and then you read a newspaper, you realize how frequently they lie. And you might think, well, I don't know anything about any particular news source. Well, if you're watching the podcast, you probably know us. Just read any article that's like ever been written about us. And you'll be like, wow, these are wildly off in every respect. It's clearly attempting to manipulate me. And this is something that you'll feel really quickly. You have friends that are frequently in the news because you get pissed pretty quickly if you do. And then the number of newspaper newsroom employees has dropped 50% since 2008. I'm surprised not more. So the question of how are they making any
well, since 2008, Malcolm, that was already like this has been a long decline. It's been a long decline.
Yeah. So interesting. So I was looking at another study, and while people spend a minute and 30 seconds on average when they click through to a news link, they're only spending 15 seconds per page, or at least according to one study. So the numbers might even be worse than this.
Wow. Brutal.
For short form articles, it's less than 60 seconds that people spend. For long form articles, it's an average of 148 seconds.
I'm sure that's similar with the essays and videos of modern content creators as well.
Yeah,
people's attention spans are short.
Our videos typically have like about a 17-minute average watch time. But actually, that's pretty long because, like, if you refresh a page, that counts as restarting the watch time. Or if you leave and then come back to it, that restarts the watch time.
Yeah.
Uh-oh, Simone, do you love our daughter?
No, never. No.
All right. Well, make sure she doesn't grow up.
Remember that the media says that we actually hate children.
We do.
It's the Guardian.
I hate children. I have a
for prenatalists. We seem to just.
Well, I mean, the thing that I make clear to them that is always so perplexing to someone in the urban monoculture is they're like, well, do you like love being around your kids and spending time with your kids? And I'm like, well, that's not why you have kids. You don't have them. You know, when Seth Rogen comes out and he's like, well, I'm not having kids because it doesn't seem like a lot of fun.
I still don't want kids. Yeah, it doesn't seem that fun.
It's like, well, yeah, I mean, obviously, you're not having kids for how they make you feel about yourself. You're having kids so that they get to exist. Yeah. You're having kids for what they're going to feel about themselves.
You're doing it for them, not for you. Gosh.
Yeah, they're like, for somebody else? No. Sorry, I must have misunderstood what you were saying. What you mean is you get happy when you see them happy, and that's why you have them. It's like, no, my emotions don't matter at all. I just am doing it for somebody else. Oh my gosh. Well, do you have any thoughts here?
When I think about the future of news and media consumption, I just feel so confused as to how reality will be understood in the future. Because right now, at least in our childhood, we grew up in a society where there was a broadly shared understanding of reality and what was happening in the world. Even if we did not have an accurate perception of what was going on, we were all kind of on the same page. You know, this thing was happening, this thing mattered. And it was really the media that largely determined what was going to be a big deal. You know, we're going to choose this international conflict as the thing du jour and this domestic thing. And that's kind of how news cycles worked. And now we live in this era where there isn't really any critical mass news media outlet that everyone reads, that everyone's on the same page with, which means that, like, aside from there being trends that people talk about online, and there definitely are trends like that, like, let's talk about trad wives, or let's talk about the why all men are thinking about Rome, right? So they're short little, but they're not very substantive, right? So
you know what's funny? I
Yes.
hadn't thought about this before, but the people who actually are the people who everyone is listening to, right? To an extent, maybe not directly, but through their influence, those are the people who truly have the most influence online. And so it's who can create in this new ecosystem those trends, the new thing everyone is talking about.
Right, because they often are sparked by a viral piece. For example, a lot of people talking about trad wives. Well, that was actually sparked by traditional media when a story came out on Hannah from Ballerina Farms, right?
Yeah, and I'd say some traditional media can do this. An interesting person who I think specializes in doing this is Ayla, who we've had on the show before. She always is creating like some the main
discussion
of Twitter pretty frequently.
Yeah, like her birthday gangbang story, amazing.
That was
like
incredible story.
Yeah.
I was like, this is the wildest thing I've ever read.
The birthday party that's shot through the internet.
The time when it turned out that she slept with more people a year than she had showers. Or she had sex more times than she showered per year.
Yeah.
And everyone was like, oh my God.
No, she's very good at that. But my larger point is that aside from these non-substantive, ephemeral, everyone's talking about this things, we won't have a shared reality anymore. And people are going to be working from very different starting points and priors, which is going to make our country even harder to live in. One of the reasons why I love Japan so much is that, at least when I traveled there as a teen a lot, it felt so cohesive. And people would say things like, well, we Japanese do this and we Japanese do that. And everyone sort of knows what to do. If, an umbrella is left on a train, well, someone will take it to this place and you'll recover it. Like, it won't be lost. And there was just all these things where everyone's on the same page. And that's because obviously they shared one culture, but there's also like people sort of watched and consumed the same stuff as well. Now, not only do we have very different cultures in the United States, no one is like, there's no simple source of truth or a couple of news channels that everyone's watching that allows us to at least have one shared reality.
I push back. I'd say that there is a shared memeplex.
But it's not substantive. Again, it's like Brad Summer. That's not substantive. No.
Brad Summer didn't really pierce through. So an example of something that I'd say that pierced through, like a song that everyone was supposed to watch, was, oh God, what was the country guy?
Richmond, north of Richmond. Yeah.
Yeah. And that was like, everybody just it was like your homework assignment for the week. Everybody has to watch this if you want to be part of any office room conversation. If you want. And, the first time this happened was Gangnam Style. This is not something that really happened before
Not
Gangnam
substantive.
Style. I would say Richmond, north of Richmond, it was very substantive.
You're going to make an argument for Gangnam Style.
Substantive. But what's also been interesting is, as we have moved to this new form of memeplex culture, a group that's really sort of progressively had less and less influence in American culture, it is very interesting to me, is American Black culture. When I was growing up, American Black culture was maybe 30 to 40% of all forwards facing American culture, from the, whether it's derivative raps and rock and, all that. Right. And now you have Black Twitter, right, which definitely has some degree of influence, but like viral memeplex level viral phenomenon don't come out of it at the rate of even coming out of something like 4chan.
Yeah, I watch a lot of YouTube videos by Black cultural commentators, both male and female.
Mhm.
But they're not generating the culture that I see them commenting on. What is really influential is drag culture, both from
Yeah.
the lexicon standpoint, but also even like women wear drag makeup now. It's so weird to me. It's hard for me to like go anywhere and not be like, why are you in drag? This is so
drag
weird.
and trans. So trans culture definitely hits the memeplex pretty regularly.
I guess only in the form of pronouns to me. I'm not really seeing it anywhere else. For me,
Well,
it's drag culture all the way.
regular. What I'm talking about is people within their culture end up hitting the memeplex. So ContraPoints used to hit the memeplex all the time, for example. Who's that philosophy tuber who's a trans woman?
I think she just calls herself Philosophy Tube, doesn't
Philosophy Tube. You know, like the trans people make up almost none of the population, and yet they probably make up about 3% or 4% of the viral phenomenal moments.
Yeah, ContraPoints needs to publish more. I want more.
They definitely make up more of them than Black individuals do, which is surprising.
What is up with that?
Trans is the new Black.
No,
I called it here on Basecamp. Trans is the new Black. They
or else, I mean, it just could be maybe that Black culture is becoming insulated to the point where mainstream culture, like at least we aren't hearing it because it's just staying within the fold. You know, like that's one guess I have.
Well, yeah.
Like the past, though, here's the thing: is like the past 2 TV series that I've gotten addicted to have at least, yeah, mostly majority Black casts. So like. At least in mainstream TV, it seems to be doing
well. No,
fine.
and I think that's what elevated it. I think it was mainstream Hollywood, you could call it, like the media elite who used to decide the musicians and the actors that you were going to see had been artificially elevating it,
inflating it. Oh, and that's why I'm still seeing. Like that's why you plenty of Black representation in traditional
stuff,
media.
but you don't see it on YouTube or coming out of. It is not that it's not there. Like Black Twitter is a thing. It just doesn't leak in the same way that Black culture used to leak. I don't go to a campus today, like an American high school, and see white kids trying to emulate Black Twitter.
Well, you're right, and that was so. Yeah, that was a really like the people that you wanted to emulate and the memes you wanted to talk about. Was very representative. Yeah,
I did the sagging pants. I did.
What happened? You're right. That's so weird. Well, and also song references. That's interesting. Okay, what happened?
I don't know what happened. I'm actually kind of like maybe we need to dig on this harder because this is an interesting question to me. Why? And again, I don't think it's that Black culture has shrunk in size or distinctiveness. I think it's that it has shrunk in permeability.
Well, but okay, maybe.
Here's an idea of what could have destroyed it.
What?
The concept of
appropriation.
I
was just thinking that when I was also thinking about how like Robin DiAngelo talks about having affinity groups and kind of how like white people shouldn't encroach into Black spaces because I don't know, my white woman tears will mess it up or something. Like I won't get it and I'll make it awkward and I'll ruin it. And so maybe, like white people are less allowed to engage with Black culture now than they were before because weirdly, a lot of the super progressive, extra woke messages have been around like, let's bring back apartheid without saying it. But that's what they're going for, which is freaking weird. Segregation, yeah.
When me and Brad first met, I didn't think we'd get along, but turns out we kind of agree on everything. We both think minorities are a united group who think the same and act the same.
And vote the same. You don't want to lose your Black card. Sorry, I don't know. I just think we should
roll back discrimination laws so we can hire based on race again. Jinx, now you owe me a Coke. Hey, tell them what you told me yesterday.
White actors should only do voices for white cartoon characters.
I've been saying that for years. Stick to your own.
Us white people, we have so much privilege.
I agree. It is a privilege to be white. Ask him about interracial dating.
All I said is that Black men who date white women have internalized racism, and white men that date ethnic women are fetishizing them.
Guys against interracial dating now. Like, am I being pranked? Did Boomer put you up to this?
Ugh, you know that taco place is white owned?
White people should be making white foods like Kraft macaroni and cheese, no seasoning, not even salt. It's like he's a mind reader. I mean, I've been pushing for segregation forever, and my man does what?
You know all white people are racist.
I'm listening.
They separated the cultures. It definitely hasn't done any favors. Well, maybe it has done favors. Maybe Black people can be like, no, Black culture is thriving now.
Yeah, maybe they're like, you know what, this is better. when white people kept messing it up, like you can't pull
I
it off.
actually think the opposite.
Stop
So what I
trying
see
to.
is black culture right now is in like death throes. And for people who don't know, blacks out of all ethnic groups in the United States have the lowest fertility rate of any American ethnic group after you get to the above the 30% income.
So in other words, you're saying that the isolation is not apparently having a positive effect.
It's
if it
not
is indeed
leading to
happening.
vitalism. It's not leading to a desire to replicate the culture through children and through living wholesome lives.
Yeah, that's interesting. That's interesting. Yeah.
But it's yeah. It's fascinating.
Well, but I also maybe that's because, and gosh, we're like this is turning into a totally separate episode. But one of the things that I found really notable is in the shows that I watch that do have at least like majority or almost wholly like majority black casts or something, you know, of like lead characters. I do this thing where I look up outfits when I watch shows because there are all these websites that like list the actual garments and how much they cost so that you can buy them. And the clothing that shows up on the people in these shows that have more black casts is consistently by orders of magnitude more expensive than the clothing that shows up on quote unquote billionaires in shows like Succession. So like Succession, like outfit ranges from like, you know, one garment will be maybe $300 to $500 on average. Mm-hmm. Some exceptions, you know, that maybe are in the 1,000 range. Very consistently on like a show like The Equalizer, which has a pretty black cast, Queen Latifah and her other, you know, compatriots in the show are wearing outfits that are like one garment, $2,000, another garment, $3,200. It is insane. And so maybe this is like a very materialistic culture where like the culture that is being siloed off is very focused on acquisitiveness or like having the very, very best products. And in a culture like that, you definitely can't have a lot of kids. You know what I mean? Like, because you can't afford.
That makes a lot of sense. Well, in most other American cultural groups, at least at the elite level, there is some level of shaming around overindulgence. And
it doesn't. Yeah, it's more like when you look at primarily black cast shows, fashion is insane, and the wealth is insane. It's like
talking about Native American black slave descendant culture in the United States, which is pretty.
Yeah, we're not talking about like
immigrant culture.
African immigrant culture.
I don't think they overconsume in the same way.
Yeah, it's very different. Yeah, well, or I think the other problem is that like a lot of the African immigrant culture we see here is old money. Like it's actually old money, and old money tends to be a lot more careful with spending, and there's less conspicuous consumption. Whereas new money wealth is all about conspicuous consumption, and definitely like the black shows that I watch that have like bigger black casts. Yeah, man, like there's just tons of wealth. The clothes are off the chain, amazing, but also insanely expensive. And yeah, like more than Succession. Like Succession, I thought was going to be like the ultimate show for me in terms of like amazing outfits and settings, and that does not hold a candle.
We're actually going to talk about why black fertility rates are so low among the wealthy blacks, just because we're already in this territory, right? The reason I believe is in Romania, when they tried to ban abortions, well, it led to a sharp spike in fertility rates. They quickly fell because having lots of kids became associated with low class decisions. In the American black community, what reaches the public, there are some like black super breeders. You know, like when I say super breeders, I don't mean this in like a negative context. We get called a super breeder. Simone and I are called super breeders. I like to say when people go, "Hey, what are you doing?" I go, "I'm super breeding." This is because Yahoo called us, I think, super breeder.
I think it was Yahoo News. Leave it to them.
But what I mean is among the people who are known as prenatalists, just having lots of kids, there's a number of black celebrities that fall into this category. But with most of them, it's with like 5 or 6 different women in situations where it was either like one's like, well, it's an accident, or like, you know, but I love all my kids, and another, there's stuff like this.
So what's the first thing that comes to mind when you think of an NBA player with a lot of kids? Well, probably someone like Dwight Howard or Shawn Kemp. And yeah, you're right. Kemp reportedly has 7 children with 6 different women, while Howard has somewhere between 5 to 8 kids according to different accounts. We're not sure. But these two guys can't even compare to this player who has 14 children with 9 different women. And his name is Calvin Murphy.
And it creates this perception that if you are wealthy, the only reason you would have a lot of kids is if you couldn't control yourself. and there
I
isn't
don't know. Like when I think of all the Black influencers I know who have a lot of kids, it comes from a more Catholic or religious standpoint and from a position of wealth. But I guess, I mean, I get there could also be just baggage of historically those who had a lot of kids, you know, we're having them as teens, we're having them in suboptimal situations that were associated with lower class and lower levels of education. And I think that's the bigger issue. Like the girl who was next to me in the hospital, who was like having kid number 3 and she was in her teens and she was like, why does this keep happening? And like, it was just clear that she was very low resourced. I think maybe that's the baggage people want to avoid when looking good.
Well,
and then the wealthy,
why was this happening? She literally didn't understand how she was getting pregnant.
We don't know why she was saying that exactly. I mean, she was in the middle of like going into labor next to me in the triage room, right? But like she like this was her this was her 3rd or 4th child, and she was super not happy about having this baby, and she was like, man, why is this happening? I don't know.
Anyway, love you to death, Simone. This episode got way too spicy there at the end. I don't even know how we got there from talking about newspapers and how many people are reading them.
Yeah.
Well,
whatevs.
We'll see if we can get past the YouTube gods in this one.
White people talking about people of another race? How's that gonna go?
Oh no. Yeah. We gotta be the right, demographics, as they say.
Yeah, but that, again, like apartheid, like I think there's this very interesting thing. If you have to stay in your own lane, you cannot appropriate, talk about, mix with. It's so weird. It's so creepy. It's so creepy.
Yeah. White people need to stop wearing dreadlocks and they need to stop appropriating Black people's music.
Shaved heads and country music, the way God intended.
Whatever.
All right, have a good one.
Ciao. Bye. Okay, you hang up.
By the way, what she means by that is the left is basically saying separate but equal. Only within your race. Only.
Well, no, not even equal, separate but affirmative action, and everyone has their special class based on historical discrimination with lots of exceptions and caveats. Because if you're Japanese, no one cares about you. Internment
Jewish. F off, man.
I guess the only thing we really disagree about is I think white people are the root of all evil.
But what did I tell you, though? If we can narrow that down to a certain group of tiny-hatted white people, I think we can come to an understanding.
Technically, I don't consider Jewish people white.
Neither do I.
We're over that. We did the reparations. The reparations were paid. Now it's over. Okay? We paid.
Sure.
Anyway.
All right, love you.
Bye. All right, I already have the link. I know you hate it, and you said it's not worth watching, but when I was thinking about the title for this video, I was thinking about the movie Amélie, that French film
I've never seen the whole thing.
Jean-Pierre Jeunet. Oh, you've seen the beginning of it, and the main character Amélie, like when they describe the things that she likes to do, one thing she likes to just wonder is, how many people are doing a thing simultaneously? Like how many people are having an orgasm this second? And it cuts to this scene of just everyone who's having an orgasm in that second in a humorous fashion. And I was just thinking, how many people are watching Legacy News right now? And I just pictured this intersplicing scene of just an endless shot of doctors' offices, hospitals, and homes of the very old and infirm. That's like it. That's the only people watching the news, and there are a lot, but that their days are numbered, and I don't think that bodes really well for the news going forward.
Yeah, the other thing I want to talk to you about before we go into the episode.
Yeah,
because people like the end segments and stuff where we talk about off-topic small bites.
Oh God, I keep forgetting that you put these in because I don't always watch the videos, and then I forget what I'm saying to you because I'm just talking to you for the first time since our morning chat, and I'm so excited to say things to you, and then I forget you freaking put them in.
I edit them if you're being spicy or something.
Okay, good.
Sometimes.
Oh, okay.
In one of the tracks, I included that part where you were telling me how much you love me when I was off camera.
Oh.
You know, I thought that was very sweet. But actually, I've had a couple instances today where I've realized, one, just how much people in our society make like massive mistakes because they don't understand that there are multiple white cultural groups. And
we all look the same.
Here's a great example of that. In one of our episodes where we had a thought crime recently and we were talking about nature, under it, obviously Google like tells us never do an episode like that again or your channel's going down. But also, I mean, that's like basically the vibe I got from the instant ad restricted, we're not explaining why, and then the big UN warning underneath it. But people in the comments were like, oh, it got a UN warning, that means it must be true. And it shows that and anyone should have been able to expect this for about half of Americans. The only cultural groups that are going to relate to a global authority attempting to decide what's true and what's not true are the hierarchically oriented cultural groups, predominantly like Catholics and other sort of high church cultural groups. But your normal Americans are going to see this and immediately think the exact opposite of what the globally appointed bureaucracy, the global bureaucracy of elites is telling them must be true. And that they wouldn't immediately recognize that they wouldn't immediately recognize that this is highly counterproductive to their aims and will probably lead more of the types of people who are already open to doubting these ideas to doubt them even more aggressively.
It looks a little suspicious. Yeah, it doesn't do very well for the conspiracy theories.
Well, to you, but then the one, I was having a conversation with a Mormon and we were talking about, he was like, he didn't understand why the backcountry people, the like greater Appalachian cultural region / backcountry people, depending on which book you're referencing, would kill Mormons so frequently. And, whenever they tried to like settle in their territory. And I was like, well, it's very obvious why they did that. And it's almost like he didn't believe that they would genuinely see them as like Stepford wives, like pod people. Like that and the way that Mormons, like dress up and generally look nice could come as a challenge, like looking down on these people. And they're already a very violent population, as we've talked about in some of what was the episode where we go over like just how violent they are.
Yeah.
I think it was the police episode where we're talking about crime rates in the United States. But I found that very interesting that he struggled to contextualize the level of, like, he thought that they thought of Mormons as just another Christian denomination. And I was like, no, not at all. Like, you guys are not like different in the way like Jehovah's Witnesses are different or something like that. It's a new theology. And to them, it seems like a derived satanic theology that is like, what would I put it? You know how like Mormonism borrows a bunch of stuff from the Freemasons and they already think the Freemasons are evil? Well, guys are like past the Freemasons in that direction in their conspiracy theories. And that's where the animosity comes from. Now, I'm not saying I endorse the animosity. I think it's misplaced, and it's just two cultures that have different ways of relating to things and don't really understand each other. And we'll do a different episode on this. But another thing that is that this culture typically uses vulgarity as a sign of authenticity. And I think that's why Mitt Romney did so bad at capturing them and Donald Trump did so good at capturing them. But anyway, we will get into the episode, and I'm excited to be talking about this.
All right, let's do it.